Hey, I'm Scotty with Great Scott Minis. We're continuing our series, How Do I Start Painting Miniatures? This video we're going to cover how to prepare metal miniatures. Some folks prefer not to work with metal miniatures, but I feel if you don't, you're really limiting yourself on working with some great sculpts. But this video, what we're going to learn is how to clean your miniature, how to base your miniature, and prime your miniature. So what we're going to have at the end is a ready to paint miniature, so we can get to slapping paint and doing what you want to do, which is paint miniatures. Alright, so I want to give you a TLDR, TLDW, didn't watch, didn't read, didn't listen. It's fine. This video is a little lengthy because I want to lay out the whole process for you in real time without cutting any corners. So look at this list. This is the order of operations we're going to go in case you need to reference this material again. So what we're going to do first, we're going to remove flashing. We're going to clean up mold lines. We're going to make this mini look pretty enough to paint. We're going to go take it to the wash tub. We're going to wash off the mold release. So we're just going to use some soap and water. That's it. And an old toothbrush. Or your wife's or husband's toothbrush. You don't have to tell them. But no, for real. You use an old toothbrush. Then we're going to assemble the mini once it's dry. So if there's any parts, any arms, weapons, other pieces, we'll go ahead and assemble that at this stage. And then the next stage, now this is optional. You can base the miniature here, which I typically like to do. Unless you're doing a super fancy decorative base, you can save this step until the end. But for now, follow along with me since you're new. Just follow it step by step. We'll make it easy, and you'll have a base miniature that will look great. So we'll go with that step. And then, lastly, we're going to prime the miniature. So there's multiple ways you can do this. You can use a rattle can. You can use brush-on paint. Either one is fine. We're going to use brush-on paint in our example. It's easier. You can use it any time of year, so it'll be great for you. So we'll go over that procedure at the last part. So without further ado, enjoy. Alright, so once again, this video is focused on mini prep. The ultimate goal for this video is to leave you with a primed and ready to paint miniature. And we're going to start with this white metal miniature. So I've got before me some of the common tools you'll use for these particular miniature preps. So first and foremost, you have your flush cutters, and we'll get some of the little bits of flashing off. Let's talk a little bit about how these are made though. So these miniatures are made with two-part mold. Liquid metal is poured into those molds. It's cooled, and then the mold is pulled apart. But before these miniatures are cast, there's mold release put in the molds. And once you take that miniature out, some of that mold release is still on it. So once we remove the flashing, clean it up, we're actually going to have to wash this, because if there's mold release still on this guy, primer won't stick and paint won't stick, and bad things will happen. So we'll go along with the whole process, but what I like to do first is go ahead and clean up the flashing and mold lines. And those mold lines appear where that seam is in the mold. And usually you'll find that halfway down the miniature, and we'll just look at this miniature together and kind of discover where that is. Typically where the flashing is gives you an indication, and that flashing is just leftover white metal from when it's pulled from the mold. So we'll take a look here. So first things first, let's just look over this miniature, and I do see a mold line on the shoulder pad, and you can kind of drag your nail across it and feel them So there's one there, and it looks like his sword is bent. You can bend it back a little bit, but be careful because you can break it. So let's start with the flashing. So we'll use these flush cutters. You can get these from hobby stores or online. So the back is flat, and we'll just go ahead and cut that. And it does leave a little nub that we'll have to clean up. And it looks like there is one here. And there's some here, the bottom of his gauntlet. We'll just snip that and examine to see if there's any more. And I do not see any. So what I like to do now is remove the mold line and clean up where that flashing was. And I did find a little bit here. Don't want to forget about that little piece. Okay. Good enough. So this is an X-Acto hobby knife. It's got an 11 blade. You can find these at big box stores. You can find them on Amazon. You can get them at your local hobby store. Your local game store probably has some type of brand of this, but we're just using the basic X-Acto brand. So let's work where the flashing was first. And you can see the sword's bent here a little bit too, and we can just kind of slightly bend it back straight. Okay, so there was a nub here at the end, and you can turn your blade away from you at like a 45-degree angle and lay it on the miniature and just drag it back. And often that is enough to remove mold lines and those little nubs left behind that you clipped away. And once again, you can use your finger to feel to see if it's still there. And it is. And we're just shaving it away. And we can use our sanding stick once that's done and just kind of give it a once over just to do a little bit more cleaning. Alright, we're good there. Just raking my nail across. There's nothing left to do there. Now we'll look at where we clipped the flashing that was on the gauntlet. Now, there's really nothing to do there either. So there was flashing on the bottom, remember, at the hilt. And that looks good too. So now let's just look for the mold lines. And remember, we saw some on the pauldrons up top. Right here in the first area. So what we can do is we can take our X-Acto, once again 45-degree angle away from ourselves, and just be very careful. Just drag it back across that mold line. I usually do this as a first step before I sand. It usually gets most of it, if not all of it. And just be careful working with these miniatures. Like, he's got a long piece of the sword sticking out, so you don't want to put too much pressure underneath it or you'll bend it again. And if you bend it too many times, you will break it. And then you will have to glue it, so it's just an added step that you would have to do. An added step that's not necessarily fun. Alright, so we got that side. We'll do this side. I think this side we're able to get a little better. Let's go back to this side again. Yeah, so we worked out pretty good there. So we know the seam is going this way across the top of the miniature. So it'll probably intersect down the arm somewhere. But I don't see anything immediately visible here. And we're just looking down the legs. just for any potential mold lines. So we got lucky with this guy. He's pretty clean. There is a little bit of flashing on the bottom. We'll take our flush cutter and see if we can't just remove that little piece, and we did. So when we base it, it'll lay more flat. That's always great. So here we are. We're cleaned up, no mold lines. So at this point, what we're ready to do is wash the miniature before we put it on a base. So let's get ready for the next step. We'll clean this guy up, and we'll see you in the next segment. Alright folks, it's now time to start washing our minis. And what you want to do first is stop up your sink. It's very important. You don't want any of your mini parts going down the drain. I don't wash directly in the sink. I'll use a Tupperware container. Any size will do, as long as your minis can get submerged in the water, you'll be good. So we'll fill it up with some water and a little bit of Dawn. Just a little. You don't need a lot. Just a little dab will do. And another component that you want is an old toothbrush. So we'll get warm water, Dawn, and then we'll place our minis in the container. Usually I do more than one, but we will jump to 2 metal miniatures that we're preparing. So we have the vampire on the throne. He'll take a dunk. The back of his throne. And then we also have this vampire wielding a 2-handed sword that we prepped a while ago. So we'll just let him sit there for just a few seconds. We'll take the old toothbrush and just lightly brush the miniature just to knock the mold release off. Just as simple as this. We're getting all the sides. Rinse. Make sure you get all the water off. And you can put the miniature on a drying towel, which I have off camera. Alright. And remember, this is just so these, well, the super glue will stick, the primer will stick, and ultimately the paint. Okay. We'll let this guy dry. Got the back of the throne here. Be careful not to bend any swords or spikes or anything like that that's sticking out. Alright, that's all of our miniature components, and I will see you on the bench when we go to the next step. And now we need to put it together. So here's our vampire on the throne again. I've got some green stuff next to me. This is a 2-part plastic putty. So you mix the green bit and the blue bit together and it makes green stuff. So I'm just gonna take my hobby knife and we're just gonna get us a little bit because we won't need much. And we'll mix it together. Just gonna score a piece here and pull it apart. And it's good to have a little water nearby because this is a little sticky. I do have some water. I have a paint cup with fresh water, so I'm just gonna dip it in there a little bit. Get some on your fingers so it doesn't stick, and you just knead it together and just mix it. And you're basically just folding it over. Now you don't need this, but I do like to use a little bit. And as you can see, as we're mixing, it's turning it green. So when we do mix this with the super glue, we'll rub a little bit of super glue on one of the metal pieces. We'll attach some green stuff. We'll slap the other piece on, and it bonds pretty quickly. And if it gets a little sticky on you, go back to your water, which is off screen here. And we're green, so we're good to go, and we don't need much. So I'm just going to pinch off a little bit. We'll set it right here, and we'll look at the miniature and do a dry fit, so we'll see where the back of the throne will go. And you see there's a lot of play here. There's no divots or anything really to show you how to go except lining it up with the bottom. So that's what we will try to do. And I'm going to use the brush on super glue from before, which is, this is my first time using this particular brand. So I'm going to set that to the side. But first, let's just roll out a long, skinny piece of this green stuff. And I'm just trying to think of where I want it. I think it would be good to go along this area right here. So yeah, I think that'll be good. I'm gonna get another small piece, and what I'll do is get that going on the other side. So essentially what I'm gonna do, we're gonna put brush a little super glue on basically the back here at the feet, and then some towards his back, and we're not gonna go up so much to get into the detail of that cloak. So, and once we have the super glue in place, we will attach the green stuff, and then we'll attach the back. I'm gonna need to get a little more water. Don't get it on your finger. I could use like a pair of tweezers. That might be a better option, but you know, if we glue our fingers together, we glue our fingers together. I kid, don't do that. It's actually not pleasant. Okay, so I'm going to put this bigger piece up top. Alright, we're at a spot where we will glue some of this back here, especially around this nub. This is the worst brush I've ever seen. Then we'll turn it, and we will smush it together. Should have a little bit of working time here to make sure it's flush. And let's make sure that it lines up. And it does. And I'm just going to set it on the bench. There's no wobble. We're flush at the bottom. So we can take the excess with our hobby knife and kind of rake it away. We could use a sculpting tool too to mash it in there more, but I don't think we need to. Just dip the hobby knife in some water. And that's going to be pretty smooth. And also you can use a toothpick and go very lightly, and I'll show you what that looks like. Once again, I'm going to dip this in some water. And we're bonded to this miniature here. So there he is, sitting on his throne, and he's not going anywhere at the moment. If you were just to do super glue alone, it would take longer to bond. You can use a product called Zap Kicker, and it is a CA accelerant. Super glue is CA glue. So you could put your super glue on, hold it, make sure you don't have any on your fingers, and then spray the Zap Kicker onto the super glue, and what that'll do is that'll instantly cure it. And I do recommend maybe rinsing the miniature off or washing it again once that's dry, but you know, give it a good 10 minutes and then just lightly wash it again and you'll be good to go. But here we have a put together miniature with a little bit of green stuff and some super glue. Next, all we need to do is put a base on this guy, and we'll go back in the to that in the next segment. Alright guys, so we're back here. We want to put miniatures on bases. Our vampire on the throne, he's sitting this one out because the green stuff that we use does need 24 hours to cure, so he's going through that stage now. So we have some single part miniatures here that we're going to put on bases. I'll probably just show you one just to save on time. But some tools we'll use is a pin vise, which is this guy, aka a hobby drill. So we'll use this guy to drill our holes. And for pinning, we're just going to use a couple of large paper clips here. Easy peasy. And then to do a little pilot hole, we'll use our hobby knife. So you got to be very careful when using the hobby knife for this procedure. So I've kind of went ahead and done that with this guy here. You don't want to drill up through the base or through a foot, so you have to be careful, and you do want to look and see where the miniature would sit on the base. So this guy covers up pretty much the whole thing. So looking at this miniature, just kind of flip it at an angle for you. We'd want to put the pin towards where the heel of the foot would be, so it'll be a little bit inside the lip here of the plastic base. And then on this guy, he's a little chunkier and we have a little more freedom because there's more material to drill into. So we can go into this rock here, up through the rock. We can go through his heel here. So easy peasy. So let's just look at this guy real quick and we'll figure out where his heel is. It's about right here. We'll go in some. And we have, well, we could go back a little bit. And you just want to just push the knife in there just a little bit, and then you can kind of twirl it around with no pressure. Just be careful. You don't stab yourself. That's our goal. No stabbings. Alright. So I've got a little pilot hole there. And I'll take my drill. And then we'll start drilling. Try to hold the drill straight. You don't really want to go at an angle. And like I said, we don't need to go far. And these drills have the back piece on here spins, so you can kind of just hold it in your hand and twist it with your index finger and thumb. Okay. Just round that out. We'll look at his other side. This one will have to go a little shallower, just because there's this stamp in the base here. There was a cavity in the metal there. I felt the drill go through, but it did not go through. If I can find out where I was. It's actually the drill slipping on me. Tighten up. All right. I'm gonna go just a tad bit more. We're right under the foot. I really don't want to remove any more material. We may go a little further into the miniature than we want. So I also have some needle nose pliers here. I would rather use these to clip the paper clip than my hobby cutters. I just don't want them to go dull and ruin the flush cut. I know we're not going to be going very far into the base and into the miniature, so I'm just going to cut a little piece. My finger's holding the other side so it doesn't go shoot across the room. So we just have a little pin there, little piece of paper clip. And I will get one more. And I'm getting it from the other side because I want a straight piece. Okay, we got our 2 small pins. And we can test them out where we drilled. Here's our first. And I do have a little green stuff from earlier, so we could kind of put a little super glue in the hole, pack a little piece of green stuff, and then place in the pin. I think that's what I'll do. I haven't tried that before, so we're gonna try new stuff. And here's our hole on the other side, and we'll test the pin. It will fit if your hands can be steady. So I wish I could go in a little deeper. It looks like I can, so I will. If we go through, oh well, we can use some green stuff to fix that. I just want more of a bite. Okay, now we have something to work with. Okay, so what we'll do is we will dip our finger in some water, go back to our green stuff that we had from a while ago. This is an optional step, once again. And I'm only getting a little piece, just enough for to fill those holes, so we can split this in two. It's just a little dot, a little dab. Okay. I'm actually going to break it into quarters because that I think will work better. So let's double check that we did not go through. I don't see anything. But instead of holding him down just like that, in case we did go through, we'll kind of hold him at an angle. I'm using thin super glue. So if there is a hole all the way through, it would run over the miniature, which I did not want to do. So first I'm gonna dab this piece of paper clip in the super glue, so it does have some super glue on the tip. I'm gonna get this green stuff, put it in the hole, and see if we can't mash this pin in. Let's get some excess away. We don't want that. Just rub it off on our paper towel here. You don't want it on your hands. Okay. Just taking my pliers to do this because I don't want to super glue my hand together, but we're down there. That actually worked super well. And I'm taking a toothpick like we had from before. Let's just spread this out some. That's perfect. That actually worked better than expected. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So we have our green stuff ready. I'm actually going to pinch off a smaller piece. And set that to the side. We'll put a little bit of super glue in our drilled hole. Perfect. Place the green stuff and pack it in. Let's get the pliers again. Okay, and we are in. Let's kind of make it straight if we can. There we go. And I'm just flattening the green stuff as best as possible with my toothpick. There we go. Now we just let this guy dry. I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. And once this dries, we'll go ahead and pin it to the base. Alright, so we're back. We have the pinned miniature, or we have the pin sticking out of the miniature rather. 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Alright, so now we have the pins sticking out of the base of the miniature. We're ready to actually add them to a base. What we want to do first is to make these pins relatively the same length. As you see, they're a little different. So once again, I'm just going to use my needle nose pliers and try to get them at about the same length. And I'm putting my finger over the other portion. Just don't pinch yourself. But the reason I'm doing this is because this piece of paper clip can shoot across the room, and I don't want to do that. Now look, we're at an even length there. The piece of paper clip is going to be inside the pliers. We'll just throw that on our paper towel, set this guy to the side, and I'm going to do the same thing with this fellow. And once again, finger over the back. We'll see if we took off enough. Close enough. That'll work. So what I'm going to do is get our bases here. We have our pin vise. Going to move that to the side. And we'll just look to see where these would stand. So you could try to eyeball these drill holes. I'm not gonna do that. There's a couple ways you could do it. This is the way I like to do it. Save your bottle caps. They're useful. You'll see later on in the series I use these for tons of things. But for this, I'm just gonna use some 50-cent craft paint. Make sure it's a different color, obviously, than your base. Shake it just a tad. And we'll put some in the cap. And all I'm going to do is dip my pins in the paint and move that to the side. Line up your base, figure out where you want your mini, and just press down. It's like a stamp. And then I will drill out those points. So that base goes with this guy, this base goes with this fellow. Boop. It's as simple as that. So we'll set the paint to the side just in case we do more later. And all you do is drill the holes. This will be a little bit easier to drill since it's just plastic. And we're through. Don't have your fingers on the other side. Okay, 2 holes. exactly where we had the miniature. And just to make sure we're on screen with this one again, paint is here. Okay, that's one. And we'll get the second one. Alrighty, so that was this guy. And he's through the base. Now you do have the pins sticking out. So what we can do is we can go ahead and super glue this, or we could trim the pins. I like to bend them, but these guys need a little bit more drying time before I want to do that. So we will let them dry and we will bend them. Now this guy, he's sitting nice and flush. Those pins are sticking out a little bit, so we'll just bend them slightly. So what I would do, go in here with the needle nose, do a bend, and I'm going to bend the opposite way with the other. And there we are. And what we'll do is we'll put a little super glue under here on the base. And you can do this before you actually pin. I'm just going to put some in the back. I'm using thin super glue on this guy. I would probably recommend using gel, just so it's a little bit thicker. But that he's pinned, he's good to go. Our other guy needs to dry just a little bit more before we pin him. But once this guy dries on the left, we can do some basing to make it not look so bland. I've got some vampires here I've done earlier. I mean, it being on a base is great, but you do want it to have some flavor. You want some earth texture, some groundwork, some cobblestone, some dirt. So we'll work on doing that here next. All right. Alright, so on this step, we're actually going to put some texture on these bases. So this is a pretty old method. We have some playground sand here. And you can get this at hardware stores, big box stores. But I have some playground sand in a Ziploc bag. And what we're going to do is just use regular white glue. And we're going to brush that on the base. We're going to dip the base in the bag of sand, knock as much off as we can, and that's going to be our ground texture. So we'll go ahead and get started. You can use a cap like I did before as a little glue palette. So that's what I will do. And just put a good bit of glue in there. All right. And I'm going to wet my brush in a little paint cup. Just getting some water on the bristles. And really, I'm just slapping on the glue. If there's any gaps in the mini, I'll throw some glue in the gap if I can. And if you get any on the lip of the miniature, you can just wipe it away. I'm being pretty generous since there's a lot of area on this particular miniature. That's all it is. We'll put our paintbrush to the side, open our bag. And here we go. And I'm just dipping him in, submerging the base, and just tap the excess off. Now we have ground texture on a base. And I'll let this dry overnight. You can go back over it with a little more PVA white glue on top. Move that back to the side. So we got a little bit more glue on our brush. I noticed a couple of gaps. And we'll take it for another dip in the bag of sand. Okay, awesome. One and done. We'll set him to the side, and we have this guy as an example as well. So we'll go ahead and glue this base up. And this guy, I really don't like the texture on the existing base, so I'm actually going to go over the existing top part of the base there that was sculpted. And we're going to put PVA there. And a little on the side. And it's cool if we touch the bottom of the boot with it. You know, they're going to be dirty anyway. They're traveling. Now this particular guy has a good gap right there where the miniature meets the base. So I'm going to put as much glue as I can right there. I might do 2 layers. I'm going to wipe that from the lip of the base and this as well. And let's go for a dip. If you get some on the side, it's no big deal. I'm just wiping away the extreme excess. Looks good to me. There's a little bit of glue right there by his right foot that didn't really get any sand. There we are. And we'll let those sit for about 24 hours, or at least overnight. Overnight should be good enough. And then we'll come back and we can actually prime these guys. But here we are. Miniature 1 with sand. And miniature 2. And that's going to be about the easiest way to get your bases done. at least when you're starting out, but it's better than nothing. I mean, you have some texture versus none. I mean, texture is going to win all day. But yeah, there we go. We'll see you in the next step when we get ready to prime these guys. Alright, so we've got our miniature on a base. We've got some texture down there as well, so he's ready to prime, and then we'll be able to paint him. And by far the easiest way to prime this guy is with a rattle can. You can get this at any big box store. Rust-Oleum does great for me, but do make sure that you do get a flat primer. You don't want satin or gloss because paint will have a tough time sticking to that. Also, you want to pay attention to the directions on your particular can of spray primer because you do need a certain humidity and temperature for the primer to behave well. So just keep that in mind. If you try to spray in off conditions, funky things can happen. You can get chunky primer, glossy primer, goopy primer. It's just all types of bad things can happen. Also, when you do spray your primer, you do want to go light-handed because you don't want to clog detail on your miniature. I'll give some tips on that here in a little bit, but first let's move on to some other types of priming techniques or tools. You can use an airbrush. Now this will work in any weather, but as a beginner you likely won't have one of these, and I really wouldn't suggest getting one until a little bit later on in your hobby journey. They are a useful tool, but you may want to wait a few months, make sure that you do enjoy painting. But if you do, this is a tool that will save a lot of time. You can prime in any weather. And it's also great for laying down base coats. So I just wanted to throw this out there as a particular option. But the method that we are going to use on our miniature is to use brush-on primer. So this is Stynylrez. It's a pretty good brand of primer. You can actually shoot this through your airbrush too. But this method, of course, it's very beginner friendly. You can use it in any type of weather. And it's what I would recommend for you to do right now. And in this next piece, we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, so let's zoom in just a little. We've got our miniature here, we've got our primer, and I've got a handy bottle cap. So you can use a palette if you want. You can use an old bottle cap. So since I'm just going to be priming one or two miniatures here, I'll use a bottle cap. I won't bother dirtying my palette. But one thing that you do want is some type of holder for your miniature to go on. This is an old piece of cork. You can use wine corks as well. I do have a hobby holder that uses bottle caps to screw on, and you can use sticky tack or poster tack to put on whatever holder that you're using, and then you can simply stick the miniature on there and he's not going anywhere. So this way you don't get your hands on the miniature, you don't rub off paint or primer, and it's just a whole lot easier to manipulate the miniature. So let's get back to our bottle cap. We've got our primer, and then we also have a water glass here to clean our brush. And you can just use any old junky brush, and I use cheap synthetic brushes for this. You don't want to use any good brushes really, but dip the brush in some water. We'll do that off screen there. So we've got a little water. Shake our brush on primer, and then we can just put a little in our cap here. Be careful when closing the lid because it can get primer everywhere. So once again, this is Stynylrez black primer, and you can get all different colors. You can get white, gray, peach, green, all types of fun things. So this is a little thick out of the bottle. I'm going to add just a tad bit of water, and all I'm doing to do that is dipping my brush in my water pot and just bringing it back to my bottle cap or palette, wherever I have my primer. And then at this point, we can just start laying it down, brushing it on. So since we glued sand on the base, I'm just tapping it all around the base, and this is actually a technique called stippling. So we'll go ahead and fill out your painter dictionary with some terms. So we'll just stipple this on there, and I'm just getting the sand, and this primer will help lock in the sand. Alright, now we can start really painting, and make sure you get everywhere, and you don't want to be super thick with your paint. And if you think you have too much, you can just go on your paper towel, wick some off of your brush, and there you go. And make sure you get in all the crevices. And if this paint looks a little too thin for you, once it's dried, you can also go over it with another coat if you like. And I would actually recommend that. You don't want to see any metal shining through. Just get his little arm there. And try not to work over any primer that's drying. If you do, you may rip up that paint that's drying and cause chunks or texture on the miniature, and you don't want to do that. So this down here is actually drying a little bit, so I'm going to stay away from there for right now. And we'll just go up to the helmet and the shoulders. Alright, so you can see some spots we missed. So what we'll do is we'll let this dry, and we'll come back and hit those spots that we missed, because right now you don't really want to touch that, or else, like I said, you can create texture and rip up paint that's already drying, and that's a bad thing. You don't want to do that. So just sit, watch it dry. As I watch intently. No, don't really watch paint dry. You know, go do something else for a minute or two. Or if you're working on multiple miniatures, which I do recommend, at the prep stage anyway, set this guy to the side, let him dry, start priming something else. But as we've been sitting here, primer's been drying on my brush, and you don't want to let that happen. So just rinse it in your cup of water here. There we go, because you don't want to deal with a paintbrush that has paint stuck in the bristles. That's a no-no. So we're going to let this dry. We're going to come back and finish it up and get a good 2 clean coats on this guy. Alright, some bonus footage time. But first, I do want to apologize. The footage for my rattle can priming didn't come out too well. So we're going to go into a simulation mode once again with rattle can primer. You have to have great weather conditions for it to come out well. But to typically spray, you want to go light-handed, start before the miniature, as you're spraying go across the miniature, and let up and do quick motions. Get the top and get the back, let it dry. Don't spray anymore until it dries. Examine your miniature when you're done. Also, you want to go at an up angle too, but examine your miniature when you're done. If it needs another coat, just do another light dusting. Remember, always spray starting from beyond your miniature, go over the miniature, let go, start here, go back. You just want to go very light-handed. But with that said, we're now ready for a bonus step. So this miniature, he's primed in black. I'll typically do prime in black. He looks pretty bland. It's kind of sort of hard to pick out the details where they start and where they begin. There's a trick for that. And this is an easy trick. Once again, we're using cheap acrylic paint, 50 cent, 78 cent. I don't know how much they are now. This is an old bottle, but this is just white paint. And I've got a bottle cap here. Yes, we're going to use that again. And there's something called zenithal highlighting where you can use a rattle can where you base it in black and then you go over top in white and it simulates how the light is going to hit the miniature. This is going to do sort of the same thing, but really it's just there to pick out details and help, guide your eye and help you pick apart the different pieces of armor, sword, equipment, etc., etc. But let's begin. Shake your paint. And we'll put the paint in our handy dandy bottle cap. Alright. Oh, it's so chunky. This cheap paint, don't paint your miniatures with this. You can try, but don't do it. Just a FYI. But that's just a preview from an upcoming video I'll do. So this type of brush, this is a cheap makeup brush. You can get these off Amazon, a big pack for just a couple dollars. If you go to a big box store, they're a little bit more expensive, but this type of brush here is all you need. So what we can do is get another paper towel, which I do like the shop towels, the automotive towels. They're less fibrous and you don't get a lot of paper towel tearing as you clean your brushes and things. I'm just folding it into fourths, and what I'm gonna do, wipe some of that paint off my hand, take my brush. Do not wet this brush. We're going to use a technique called dry brushing, and it's going to be a very rough dry brushing. You can get delicate with it. You can paint miniatures pretty well with this technique, but we're not worried about that. We're just picking out details, and that's what dry brushing is really good for. So just take your brush, dip it in your paint, just the tip. You don't want to go all the way up into the metal part, which is called the ferrule. That can really gunk up your brushes and cause problems. So that's all we need. And then what we can do is get our other paper towel, or you could use this one if you want, but we'll just kind of do a circular motion, and I'm going to rub that into the bristles a little bit, and then we're wiping off the paint. Just a decent bit. Now I'm not going to wipe it off so much as I would in a normal dry brush. We're just trying to get some detail here. So, and then you just put it on the miniature. Just drag it across. You could use your nice miniature paint for this, but you don't need to. You can save that for more important things. Okay. And I'm just getting all over the miniature, just dragging back and forth from pretty much every angle. Look, he's starting to look like a real boy. And also another benefit of doing this is you get better coverage. Like if you were to paint directly on top of black, it's going to take more coats to really show that color of the paint you're applying. So if we do a little something like this, it's going to be easier for us in the long run. So sometimes the paint that you get off your brush, it's not fully dry. You can actually go back in there and pick up a little bit more instead of going directly into your paint here. So basically what we're having here is a black and white Noir representation of the miniature we're gonna paint. And if you want some more parts highlighted better than others, like this is a recess in his little cloth here, we can kind of leave it as is because that's going to be naturally darker. So I'm getting a little bit more paint. We'll go back to our paper towel, rub it in the bristles a little bit, and then start wiping it off. I'm going to go a little bit heavier so we can really pick up the edges. And now I'm focusing on the top of the miniature more. So that's going to be a lot lighter in color. And face detail is cool too. So check out this guy's face. You know, we can pick out the nose with this method a little bit, and the lips, so you can see those to paint them. And we're just going across the shoulders and the top of the back, anything where the light points down. Or if you want to be creative and have light coming from another angle, you could also highlight that, you know. It's also a possibility. So as before, this miniature, he just looked like a blob, you know, just a black blob of metal. Now we can actually see the details in his armor. Let's pull him up here. We see the sword. It's a kind of a decorative sword. We have cloth here. He's got ornamental armor. He's got a side dagger. Yeah, so he's got some straps covering his shield. Looks like maybe a cross detail there. So, yeah, that's pretty good. And I see a spot right here where I may want to get right there on the top edges. So there we go. We actually have a miniature that's technically ready for paint. I'm going to do some of the base just to knock that out. It's not really necessary unless you want to, but why not? So remember, this was playground sand. So how about that? Just, we're playing with dirt. We have dirt on our base to simulate dirt. But is it really simulating? No. But we have it painted and sealed, and it actually blends in super well with the existing base that this guy was on. See, he's got some rock there we were able to pick out, another rock there. So we're going to do fun things with this miniature and some paint. So check him out. Here he is. You're ready to paint a metal miniature. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you may have learned something from this. And please, if you have any questions, leave a comment, because I really want to help folks out, get started in the hobby. You know, it's really enjoyable, and it's just a lot of different simple steps to get you started. If you compartmentalize them and then put them all together, you know, you really have something awesome to show for it. And yeah, just check out the rest of the videos in this series, and we'll go into some more detail. We're going to cover some other types of miniatures next before we go into painting. But once we go through the different types of miniatures, we'll choose a subject to actually lay some paint to, and I'll show you some simple techniques to get you really great results. So take care, everybody. I really appreciate it.